to the New Orleans Humanist Perspective, presented by New Orleans Secular Humanist Association, following our few principles of humanism.
We're committed to the use of science and reason for understanding the universe and for solving human problems. We're skeptical of untested claims of knowledge, but we're open to new ideas.
We are concerned with securing justice and fairness in society and in ending intolerance and discrimination. We are committed to the total separation of religion and government.
We affirm humanism as a realistic alternative to the theologies of despair and the ideologies of violence. We reject the concept of an afterlife and believe in living a full and rewarding life here and now.
We value and respect each individual's right to judge and lead their lives according to their own position, as long as it's respectful of other people living in a free society.
Hope you enjoy today's program and others in the weeks to follow. Thanks for being with us again. I'm Harry Greenberger. I host this show, and it's always a pleasure to try to bring interesting people and events to your attention. My guest today is John Barry, and the last time that you and I sat across this table, John, we were discussing your book about Roger Williams, which was a very impressive and I think successful book. And of course, we secular humanists really liked it because Roger Williams took such a strong stand for the separation of government from religion.
And also the idea of the development of individualism and legal concepts for that. But of course, we're not here to talk about it today.
That is not what we're going to talk about today, because you have made quite a public stance which has dominated pages of the Times-Picayune, some of which I have here, for quite some time, and it has to do with the restoration of Louisiana wetlands. Now, before we talk about what your present involvement, just to basic, tell us what damage has been done to the wetlands and what restoration and repair would recover from that damage.
Well, actually, I mean, you're right in the way you describe it, but I did a different way. I see it not as a restoration of wetlands, but a fight for the survival of New Orleans and the survival of people who are living all along the Louisiana coast.
Which is threatened by?
Right. The land outside, there's a saying, the Lake Pontchartrain Basin Foundation puts it this way: the levees protect the people and the land protects the levees. The land outside the levee system, whether it's marsh or in some cases as solid as the ground under downtown New Orleans, at one point it was anyway, that as a hurricane storm surge passes over that takes a lot of the sting out of the storm surge. It serves as a buffer before it gets to the levees. And the disappearance of that buffer, roughly 1,900 square miles of Louisiana has disappeared. That's almost the state of Delaware. The disappearance of the buffer has made it much more dangerous to be in New Orleans. If you put the state of Delaware between New Orleans and the ocean, we don't need any levees, if you think of it that way. So,
now what is the disappearance? Explain how land disappears.
Right. I mean, there are several factors, multiple factors in the disappearance. But one factor is the operations of the oil and gas industry. They have dredged 10,000 miles of canal through the Louisiana marsh. Every inch of those canals has allowed saltwater intrusion, which has killed plant life, and that plant life, the roots, hold the land together. It's just mud. Right. So as that happens, then the land essentially melts into the ocean. There's also the question of subsidence of the land sinking. In fact, the industry has extracted so much volume of material from underneath the Earth's surface that the surface is actually sunk.
Right. Now, what materials? I mean, I know something about salt domes or Are you talking about oil and gas?
Chiefly oil and gas, of course, but other things that come up with it.
So in the marshes of Louisiana, not only have canals been dug, but they have actually been pumping up subsurface valuable
of course,
materials.
Right, obviously, that's what they're digging
and so then that has caused some
significant land loss. Now, again, the industry is not responsible for all of the land loss, but according to every study, including industry studies, they are responsible for a lot of it. According to the U.S. Geological Survey, probably the single most highly regarded scientific entity out there, in a study that included industry scientists, they concluded that 36.06% of all the land loss in the state was attributable to operations of the oil and gas industry. So because of this, I served on the Southeast Louisiana Flood Protection Authority East.
Yes.
From its inception, which was January 2007. It's a post-Katrina reform. Create that flood protection authority.
Before we get around to the restoration, what form would restoration take? How do you restore subsidence and saltwater intrusion?
Well, it's not easy, and I mean, the Flood Protection Authority filed a lawsuit against 97 oil and gas companies. Since then, Jefferson and Plaquemine parishes have filed suit. St. Bernard has announced that it retained a lawyer, the same lawyer Jefferson and Plaquemine have. They probably will file suit. Other parishes will file suit. There are technologies that allow you to rebuild this land.
That's what I'm asking. How do you, what does recovery look like?
Well, in some cases, slurry pipelines carrying sediment out in there and filling them in, sealing off edges and things like that, making sure old wells are capped. It's not cheap. There are areas that are just open water now. They cannot be restored. And what the lawsuit from the levee board seeks is, in the instances where it's impossible to restore the land, that the oil industry pays the Flood Protection Authority some money so it can improve the flood protection system and protect people's lives and property. To compensate for the increased risk which was created by the disappearance of this land.
All right. Now I've been keeping you away from the real situation that has made the news, and that now tell me about what you and the governor and the organization that you were serving under as the vice chairman. Tell us about that whole situation.
Well, I guess basically the lawsuit was my idea, but the second I suggested it to my colleagues on the board, they unanimously supported it. Some said they wish it had been their idea, and we did come forward with this lawsuit. It took quite a while for us to find the right attorney. There was an extensive search. The attorney had to do a lot of work to make sure we had a case, and we filed. We think it's an extremely good case. Hours, the same day after we filed, the governor demanded that we withdraw the suit, claimed we didn't have any legal standing to file the suit, which we do. We've invited them, we've dared them to challenge our authority in court, but they won't because they know they'll lose, but they continue to, in the media, to say.
I'm going to want you to continue, but do you have some explanation as to why the governor was opposed to a lawsuit?
I continue to be amazed by the governor's position. They have thrown a lot of rhetoric at us, but no substantive points. Nobody has disputed the substance of the lawsuit. Even the governor's coastal advisor says, Gary Graves, he said, I'm the first one to admit there's liability there, unquote. If that's the case, then why don't you support the lawsuit? Clearly, it's political. The only reason they are against the lawsuit is politics. They used to say the flag of Texaco flies over the Louisiana Capitol. Of course, Chevron owns Texaco now. But, you know, they've come up with this litany of obviously, you know, thin reasons. I guess the only one that has any substance to it as to why they oppose the lawsuit is the idea that the industry in many instances has been cooperating in the last few years with some other levee boards and things like that around the state. And the industry has helped. They've given free rights of way, they've built pumping stations for several levee boards, and this is real money that they've helped with. It's worth millions of dollars. But their liability statewide is in the tens of billions. So if you simply do a little bit of math, you will see that they are getting politicians to support their position for between 1/100th of a penny and 1/10th of a penny on the dollar of their actual liability. So I would say that is a pretty good deal for the industry, a pretty bad deal for the taxpayer, and a terrible deal for the people who actually have their lives at risk.
I'm reading a quote from you that was in the Times-Picayune. This is a fight for the survival of the state, Barry said. We need to hold the government accountable and industry accountable. This is really a simple issue.
It is a simple issue. You know, the industry violated the law. The industry claims that they obeyed the law at the time. No. If they did that, they'll win the lawsuit. The claim that we're making is that they were never in compliance with the law. They violated contract law. They had permits which were very explicit in their language, requiring them to minimize any damage and then restore the land to the condition it was before they did the work when they finished. They never did that. There's state law that says much the same thing as the permits. They violated the law. They concede, as I say, that they're responsible, that they did it, but they just think taxpayers should pay it. I mean, one of the things that gets me, that really puzzles me, we have one of the most anti-tax governors in the United States. And yet, here's industry clearly liable. His own coastal advisor says they're liable. But rather than have the industry pay to repair what it damaged, he wants taxpayers to pay for it. It's ludicrous.
All right, so because of your position, the governor fired you.
Well, essentially, yeah. I mean, as one of the reforms after Katrina, our board, almost the only such entity in the state, we don't serve at the governor's pleasure. He can't simply go in and remove us as he can practically the member of almost every other board and commission in the state. But my term expired and he didn't reappoint me. And our board was made up of real experts. We've had on it a past president of the American Society of Civil Engineers. We had the co-author of the most sophisticated storm surge model in the world. We've got engineers who've written textbooks used in college courses. We've got, out of 9 people, well, this is a board. I mean, there were a couple other members who were also replaced with me when their terms expired too. But in total, we had 4 or 5 people involved who routinely were consulted on national policy making issues. This was a board of real flood experts.
Right. Now, other than you, were there some others whose terms expired that did not get?
There were 2 others. Yeah, and one Dave Barnes, a meteorologist from St. Tammany, his term expired. And Tim Duty, the president of the board, his term expired. However, his seat comes from St. Bernard. He has not been reappointed. He's still sitting on the board. You serve until you're replaced. I think the governor was not too thrilled with the choice he had between Tim Duty and retired Judge David Gorbaty. And so for the moment, Tim Duty is out there sort of hanging.
All right, but now, was the lawsuit actually filed?
Oh, we filed it July 24th.
All right. So, but then when you were not reappointed, why was it necessary for you to form a new organization to try to get that lawsuit to move forward, I guess?
Right.
Tell us what that was all about.
Well, this is one of the other things that I find puzzling. The lawsuit's already filed.
Yes.
We're in court, and the governor promised to introduce legislation in the next meeting of the state legislature in March 2014 to kill the lawsuit. So the idea that you would get an industry that thinks it's above the law
Yes.
to come in with the governor to interfere with a lawsuit that's already been filed, that's deeply offensive to me. It's pure politics. So I formed, at the urging of some other folks, a group called Restore Louisiana Now. Restore Louisiana Now.
Yes.
RestoreLouisianaNow.org. And the purpose of that organization is essentially to run a political campaign to explain to the legislature why it's terrible policy to intervene in the lawsuit. Let the courts decide. If the oil industry obeyed the law at the time, which they say they did, then they win.
Yes.
And if they didn't, then the levy board wins. Let the courts decide. It's a legal question.
And there are 97 oil firms that
And oil, gas, and pipeline companies.
Yeah. All right. Well, now, but what is your new organization? What specifically are you doing?
Well, we'll be running a political campaign. At the moment, I'm going around speaking. There are other people involved, of course. Walt Williams, who was the creator of Mr. Bill on Saturday Night Live, is on the board. Judge Calvin Johnson, retired judge, is on the board. We've already done polling, which shows extremely broad support for our position. In the New Orleans metropolitan area, 86% did not want the legislature to intervene in the lawsuit. Only 12% did. We'll run, be a political campaign. When we get closer to the legislature convening, then we'll start running media buys and things like that, social media, rallies, all sorts of things.
Well, the politics in Louisiana is very much leaning toward the political conservative, support the governor position in our state legislature. They sometimes vote almost unanimously for things that I think are unconstitutional. What are you seeing as your the odds of your?
I think we've got a very good chance of success. Jefferson, St. Bernard, and Plaquemine are among the most conservative districts in the state. And Jefferson and Plaquemine already filed suit.
Yeah.
And St. Bernard, I believe, will file soon. Our board is a majority Republican board. One of our board members describes himself as, this is his words, a right-wing extremist. And he's a Tea Party guy. This is a Tea Party issue on our side. Again, if the oil industry doesn't pay to fix what it damaged, then taxpayers, or it's not going to get fixed. So why should taxpayers pick up the tab for something the most profitable industry in the history of the world did? It's ludicrous.
Well, let's say that you have logic and reason and justice on your side. The world doesn't always operate that way, does it?
Well, that's why Restore Louisiana Now exists.
Okay.
Because when the public gets involved, then politicians listen. If you've got an issue that doesn't get any public attention, it is much easier for politicians to vote in a particular way because nobody notices. But when you have a highly publicized issue and the logic and reason and right and justice and all that stuff seems so clearly on one side,
Yes.
then it becomes much more difficult for an elected official to go against that.
How is your organization funded?
Well, we're seeking donations, restorelouisiananow.org.
Because, to lobby the legislature you can't do that without some money.
That's exactly, well, we can lobby without money. We're not planning to make campaign contributions. What you can't do is buy media ads without money. You can't bus people in for a rally without money. You got to pay the bus drivers and the gasoline and so forth. But
so you're going to need some money, and you're presently accepting contributions.
we are accepting donations. Yes.
All right. Now this is
on our website.
Okay. Now I'm going to ask something which I presume you have totally considered, but I see this recent article in the paper that says Corps officials say no silver bullet for the coast. I'm sure you read the article. A senior Army Corps of Engineers official warned that a moonshot-like science program is needed to address the effects of global warming on federal state plans to restore Louisiana's eroding coastline. Brigadier General DeLuca. It says, for New Orleans, the worst case predictions indicate that there could be as much as 5 feet of sea level rise along the Louisiana coast by the end of the century on top of local subsidence. Now, my question is, if you accomplish the restoration that you're after, it's not all going to be washed away within a matter of, decades.
Well, the reality is, if the worst case scenarios come true, it's going to be almost impossible.
What if it's not 5 feet raised? What if it's 2 feet of water of sea level?
That you have a chance of dealing with. The worst case, it's over, frankly.
It just washes away whatever you...
Well, it's not. We're hardly the only part of the world that has a problem. Every coast, as New York discovered a year ago with Sandy, that which they never thought about, they're vulnerable. Every port in the world has parts of it below sea level. But one of the things that gives us, in many ways, a better chance in some other areas is that the Mississippi River actually built the land. All the land from Cape Girardeau, Missouri. The Gulf of Mexico used to go up to Cape Girardeau, Missouri. All the land from Cape Girardeau to the present mouth of the river was built by the deposit of sediment.
Okay.
And if you give the coast sediment and fresh water in enough quantities, then the coast is alive. It's dynamic. Those plants fight for life.
Yes.
It's not like all of a sudden sea level rise goes from one day it's here and 24 hours later it's here.
It's gradual. It's
right.
gradual.
So if with sediment, they will fight for life, and they actually can rise with sea level. If it's the worst case projections, no, then there's no chance.
Well, what would this public access television, there's no way of knowing the size of our audience locally. Now, we do get converted, and this program will go into YouTube where people can see it. It will go to the Secular Humanist website where people can see it. And now this station is putting it into the internet in some form. What would you like to tell the people who might be watching this show in the near future, that why they should be involved?
Well, when we filed the lawsuit, a reporter asked me why I was doing it, and I never actually thought about that question until I was asked. And I thought for a second. I answered because I love New Orleans and I want it to survive. And if we don't do this, we don't think it'll survive. There is a master plan developed by the state. It is a good plan. It's one of the few things that scientists and the state legislature agree on. The legislature passed it unanimously.
The master plan, what, for the restoration?
Yes, a master plan for the coast. And the scientific community, a broad consensus, thinks it's a very good plan. The problem with the plan is there's no funding for the plan. What these lawsuits will do is fund the master plan in those areas.
Is that a state or a federal plan?
It's a state plan. Obviously, we need the cooperation of the federal government through the Corps of Engineers, but it's been, again, widely praised, embraced as a model by the federal government.
Let me ask you this, because it's just about time for us to go. If the lawsuit, it goes into court, how long will it be before you think there will be a court decision?
Obviously, that's going to take a long time. What I do think, however, is if our lawsuit and the other lawsuits filed by parishes and more parishes come in, if we had any support from the governor, he would bring the industry to the table. What we really want is a statewide solution. Cut a deal with the industry. There are things the industry wants from the legislature I'd be happy to support. That's the real solution.
All right. Well, John, I appreciate your being here.
Thank you for having me on.
The issue is a matter of quality of life, which our organization is greatly concerned about.
It's a matter of life, not just quality of life.
And I hope you folks who are watching our show can appreciate this situation and can find some way to support this movement. Thank you for being with us. We hope we'll see you again very soon.